right, and we're live. Let me give a quick introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Godzilla Guy, as most of you know. Today, it's an honor. We have Greg Keyes. He has written a whole bunch of books like Newton's Canon and The Shadow of God, but you guys will know him as the writer for the novelization of King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Godzilla X Kong, and my personal favorite comic, Godzilla Dominion. Greg Keyes.
Hi, guys.
So, there's one question a whole bunch of people have that I'm going to ask you early, which is, how do you get into the writing business? A lot of my fans want to become writers.
How do you get into writing business or the business of writing for Legendary?
Just in general.
In general, I started writing literally when I was a kid, in second grade, when I realized that there was such a thing as writing books. I wrote all through my childhood, all through my teen years. In my 20s, I got kind of serious about it, and I started writing about a book-length manuscript a year. I wrote 3 or 4 of them that were rejected, but I got good feedback from publishers. And then I wrote one, The Waterborne, that sold within a month. And, since then, I have kind of been established. So it's been much easier since then. Once you sell 1 or 2 books and they do okay, then you can usually keep going. And, I continue to do stuff like that, like those first books that are just my own work. But I got into the franchise business writing for, actually, I guess I started with a show called Babylon 5. And that happened because I already had an established publisher who knew I could write a book. And they got the contract to do that. And then after that, I got Star Wars and did a few books for them.
Yeah, I noticed you did, what was it? Victory, Edge of Victory, Rebirth, right?
Yeah, there was an Edge of Victory, and then there was
the final
third book,
Prophecy.
Yeah, right.
All right. Awesome.
And then with Legendary, I've kind of had a special relationship, I guess. I first did. Actually, the first thing I wrote for Legendary was Pacific Rim book. It wasn't a novelization. It was an book set between the movies.
Were they comics?
No, it was a novel.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I've gotten a couple figures that come with comics.
Yeah, it was called Ascension, and it's set between the 2 movies, and it kind of mostly backgrounds those sort of teenage characters that were in the second movie.
All right.
But Legendary, they published through Titan, which is a British publisher that's done a lot of my books. I've done a lot of books with them. I did the Planet of the Apes books with them, and I did the novelization of Interstellar with them. And so when the I guess I first got Godzilla King of the Monsters, and when that came along, I had already seen the Godzilla, I guess 2012, and I'd seen Kong Skull Island, and especially after Kong Skull Island, I was really keen to do books in this universe. And so I basically told my editor there, look, if anything comes up Legendary, please consider me. Which is not usually how things work. Usually it kind of goes the other way around, but I was kind of a fan, so I made that request. And since then I've worked pretty successfully with those guys. I've got a pretty good relationship with them. So
well, I gotta ask, since you've been working on Pacific Rim, what's your favorite Jaeger?
Oh, well, I guess it would have to be Gypsy. I mean, that's the underdog. I'd have to think about it a little more, because I didn't invent any Jaegers, but I did flesh some out. And it's just been, it's been years since I worked on that. So that's something I have to think about a little bit. Because Yeah, because I really enjoyed fleshing some of those guys out, and I even, I got to not invent kaiju, but they had sort of a list of kaiju with very few characteristics that I got to sort of fill in the blanks.
Mm. All right. So I just want to make something clear to everybody real fast. There are, of course, some questions that we're not going to ask that I had to delete. Of course, one's like, what's the entire plot? So if you guys are like, where's my question? It probably means it was either a question that was repeated like a bajillion times, or a question is like, just completely spoilers for a movie or novel. So I had a Google form. We have quite a few. I have a couple I want to ask off the bat real fast. So I understand there's ones like yesterday. There's ones like what I asked that you can't answer. So I've gone through again, like I said, and gotten rid of some ones that are like that. But let me. I'll move. Okay, let's see. First up, so to my knowledge, in Dominion, Godzilla was tired to an extent, right? He was like fighting a whole bunch nonstop.
Yeah, he was seeking to recharge. He had lost his, Godzilla King of the Monsters. He kind of lost his resting place, right, when Serizawa blew it up to revivify him, right? But yeah, after the big fights, he's kind of tired, and he's looking for a new place to hang out and recharge. But he keeps having to like put down some of these titans that kind of put them in their place. So, and then he runs into some unexpected issues as well. So, yeah.
All right. So one of the first ones we have is, if Godzilla wasn't tired, like if he was, let's say, not like juiced like he was in 2019, but like an average amount of energy rather than being depleted, do you think the battle with Tiamat would have gone differently? Like, would he have gotten like beaten up as easily as he was originally?
So that's those kind. I mean, I sort of indicated that those kinds of questions are difficult to answer. It's not. So there's two kinds of questions I can't answer, right? The ones that had to do with non-disclosure agreements I've made, and then the ones that have to do with the fact that while I know a lot about these guys, I know what I need to write the books, I don't know any more than that, and I don't know what plans Legendary has in the future. I'm not in that loop. I'm on a need-to-know basis, right?
All right.
So one thing I will say is that Godzilla is a moving target. He, in the Legendary universe, he's changed several times. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten a little bigger, and that's a trend that's sort of going to continue. So, would he have beaten Tiamat if he had been more easily, had he not been tired? I mean, in Dominion, I think he was surprised by Tiamat, but in the end, beat him kind of handily, or beat her kind of handily. There's a struggle because otherwise you don't have a story, right? If Godzilla it wouldn't be super interesting if he went through a story and he just dispatched everything he ran into with one blow. And Tiamat's supposed to be a fairly powerful Titan, but as powerful as Godzilla, probably not. But the characteristics of all these Titans change according to the kinds of stories that Legendary wants to tell and the kinds of stories they want me to tell. So they're not statted out, for instance, like I play in D&D, so they're not statted out like D&D monsters, and we don't run simulations to see who would win under what conditions.
Yeah.
That's basically story driven.
All right. Another one I have, a while ago, I did a video on every monster in the Monsterverse, which took a very, very long time. And of course, the instant, Kong Skull Island came out, everybody made sure to correct me on all the stuff I missed. But I went over the Murderfish and the Murderfish Genitor, and I had this idea going how it looks like she's based off of that like super like dinosaur age fish. I forgot what it's called off the top of my head, but with like the really strong jaw, like the bone at the top of its jaw, seemingly. Is that?
Yeah, it's you know, I'm blanking on the name too, but
Yeah, and it starts with a D.
It's way
Oh yeah,
it's actually
someone got it.
way before the dinosaurs. It's it's a at least a Permian, if not a Silurian or Ordovician. It's a really ancient fish, and so the way that works, I had written so I didn't do the drawings. Obviously, I didn't do the art. That was Drew Johnson. He did an awesome job.
Yeah.
So the way that works is I write a script, almost like you would for a movie, and I talk about what's going to be in each frame. I put my vision for each frame of the graphic novel is going to be, and then Drew translates that, and of course also Legendary gives their input as well, because they have a book division and a comic division of, well, they did the graphic novel, right? So so they chime in as well. And when it's a visual thing like that, I provide a bunch of different images of what I'm thinking about. And in this case, I was thinking about sort of a composite animal, but it definitely was tending toward these sort of prehistoric giant fish-like things. And he kind of ran with one of the images I sent him, and it was that one. So yeah, I would say it's fair to say that we're playing off of what is it called? I've forgotten.
I sent it. It's the Dunkleosteus. Yep.
But my problem with it is I've been a fan of that monster or that animal since childhood. And in childhood, it was called something else. They've changed the scientific name of it.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I have a problem remembering Dunkleosteus. But yeah, that's clearly the primary inspiration, at least for the images in the book.
Yeah, I in the all the MonsterVerse stuff, I was just saying how if we like multiply like the Dunkleosteus like size to the murderfish genitor, it should have like an super insane bite force. So we see how it's able to just casually bite into Godzilla as well. So my question was, given how much it's able to like bite, and given the first panel we see it's busting out of a rock wall under, inside in the water, do you think it could, to an extent, like burrow itself?
Yeah, probably. I didn't go into that, but it's definitely from lower down, right? And it was able to, I would say, burrow up from Hollow Earth, or at least the space between Hollow Earth and our Earth, because of that site was partly excavated by a nuclear blast, right? So A, there's something to eat up there, it senses, and B, maybe its way up is a little bit easier. But yeah, I definitely think it could probably, to a certain extent, burrow or smash through at least thin, straight up rock.
Nice, awesome. Do you have like any input at all in any way on the films, or like not really?
Not really, no. In fact, in most cases, I don't even see the films until my books are nearly written. So I'm working from scripts. So yeah, no, it doesn't flow that way. I talk a lot with those guys. I've had conversations with the directors and the producers, and definitely with the people in the publishing wing pretty constantly. And they have a position there called mythology manager, which I think is one of the coolest positions you could possibly have, where they keep track of the kind of stuff we're talking about right now, right? And that's not just for the MonsterVerse, that's also for Pacific Rim and everything else Legendary does that has any kind of more than one movie involved. And of course, there's also a relationship with Toho. Like, you can't do anything with Godzilla, for instance, without making sure Toho's not freaked out by it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want another 98.
Yeah. Well, there's that, and there's just like, it's their thing, So if it's a Titan that Legendary invented, we don't have to consult with them.
All right, cool.
But if it's Godzilla or Mothra or Ghidorah, yeah, we have to clear stuff with them as well.
All right. For when you're writing, do you take like any inspiration from like previous films, like Heisei, Millennium, Showa era Godzilla?
Yeah, well, I like to throw Easter eggs in if I can. Sometimes they get taken out just because, again, references to the Japanese films have to be cleared, unless they're really, really obscure. And I'll give you an example of. Well, maybe I can't give that example. Unless they're really, really obscure. So I can throw things in that are suggestive, and I'll just put it this way: I throw things in to the graphic novel that are suggestive of some of the monsters from Toho films, but you can't pin them down precisely, because if you could, then we would have had to have a conversation about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I always have to clear that kind of thing. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. Like I wanted to make a reference in Godzilla vs. Kong to the name of the ship that was in the original Kong Godzilla matchup, right back in the
I know they did something in King of Monsters, like a little.
And I spent considerable time, because there's only a couple of fuzzy shots of the bow of that ship with the name on it, which is, of course, in Japanese kanji. Finally figured out what the name of the ship was, and was told I couldn't use it because it was the same ship name as a ship that we sunk in World War II. So it just seemed a little fraught, but that's the kind of reference I like to try to make if I can.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But anyway.
Next up, this isn't like, I'm not trying to ask for like an official answer. It's just, me and my friends always have these just for fun. My argument for if every monster versus kaiju got into a fight, like who'd win or at least survive and, outlast the rest. My argument's Shinomura from Awakening, just because of his insane regeneration. It's just kind of impossible to kill him. Are you like able to answer that, or no?
No, I can't. I mean, I couldn't really tell you if that's the one that would win or not.
All good.
Again, this is sort of plot driven. I mean, if the plot determines he win or lose, then he will. In absolute terms, almost all of these things, again, are moving targets in terms of what they can and can't do and who they can and can't beat.
Yeah.
And there's never going to be a story in which, say, Godzilla is always at full power, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or, and in fact, he tends to, in various stories, power up to a certain extent, like go beyond his abilities. His normal abilities.
Yeah, like Burning and Kaiser Ghidorah form.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm sure you've seen the trailer for the new film, right?
Yes, sir.
So there's something going on there. So yeah, that's just the kind of question I think that's best left to you guys, because it kind of falls into the realm of fan speculation.
Yeah.
And, maybe if I was the mythology manager at Legendary, but I would say even a director of one of the films can't answer questions like that, because they don't know what the next director is going to do. So, and I'm way down that pecking list. So I don't really determine that kind of thing. I just do what I'm told to a certain extent.
You mentioned earlier how like you can make like very brief like nods and hints to like older kaiju. Now, pretty much everybody has seen the bones right outside of Godzilla's lair, and everyone's just like kind of nodded and said, yeah, that's Anguirus. Is that like a nod you guys are going for, like an example like that?
That's again, I can't say.
Yeah. All right.
On that one.
Let's see. All right, I'm just looking at the rest of my questions, and they're kind of like that. So I think let me just see. Oh, well, since how do you pronounce it? Is it Majigra from the King of the Monsters novelization?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is it Majigra? Margygr, the like younger.
Oh, it's probably. I think that's Siberian language, so it's probably Magira.
Magira. All right.
Yeah, yeah. I've never heard anybody pronounce it either. So, and I didn't make it up. So,
but you wrote about him though, correct?
Briefly, I think there's a
he just dies.
Yeah.
So since
he's dead.
Yeah, since he's already dead, like, is there any reason? I know he was like benevolent and malevolent. I can't pronounce it properly, but like Godzilla just didn't really like him in the novelization. Is there like a reason that he just like feel like you're gonna be a pain in the butt to deal with later?
No, I think that he appeared in a scene if I recall this correctly. He and I don't see that. So I did eventually see a cut of that film, and I saw a lot of visual assets before. Visual assets would just be movie stills, artist renderings.
They've made that one public. I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw the artist rendering. I don't think it made it into the movie.
Yeah, I did not.
So that's one of the fun things I get to do. Again, I have to get permission to do it, but often I'm working with older versions of a script to begin with, and I can both leave stuff in that they cut out of the movie, because very often things are cut out of the movie for sake of time, of brevity, of moving the story along. And there, I think they were just trying to give a sense of depth of the fact that Monarch is out there and that there are all these other Titans, right? Because we only see a few in 2012.
Yeah.
And they want you to know there are a lot more. Frankly, other than the still image and a few questions that they answered about that Titan, I didn't know a lot about it. I really only, if you think about it, what we learned was from the point of view of one of the characters in the book, probably Mark, if I recall correctly. And Mark doesn't know exactly what it is either. So that's sort of my point of view to a certain extent. I don't know what that Titan was able to do, for instance. I just know what it looks like and where they found it. But like I said earlier, there's sort of this need to know basis. If the Titan had ever been alive in any of the earlier script versions, or if they talked about it, I might have been able to add that in. The other fun thing I get to do in these books is just add in whole scenes, completely new stuff that was never in any script. And in fact, I have to, because the script is only about 20,000 words long, and these books have to be at least 80,000 words long.
Yeah.
So there's a discrepancy there, and so it's important and necessary to add new material that has been cut from the film, but also material that was never in any version of the film. As a writer, that's sort of the fun part for me.
Yeah. So before we move on to all the fan questions, I just have one last one, which is like the correct me if I'm wrong, but the novelizations are canon to like the general MonsterVerse films, correct? Like they're still a part of it?
What canon is whatever Mythology Manager says is canon. So I would say a tentative yes, but sometimes mistakes creep in. Like I'm pretty sure that everybody noticed that in Godzilla King of the Monsters, I described Scylla as having 8 legs when Scylla only has 6. So that's obviously not canon. It's a screw up I made and that nobody caught, right? But in general, yeah, because I clear it and clear it and clear it and clear it and clear it. So it's definitely canon at the time I write it. Now, whether it continues to be canon just depends on what the filmmakers decide to do, right?
So
in a way, I'm not the one to ask about that. I can definitely say at the time that the books are written, they are as canon as possible because they won't let me do anything that's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But what happens afterwards? Yeah, I don't have any say on that.
Yeah, because I was just like wondering how you felt because I know in King of the Monsters, and in GVK, the Muto Prime is brought up, specifically as Carcass in King of the Monsters, and you also mentioned Shinamura in the novelization of King of the Monsters. But recently, because of Legacy of Monsters, I think it hasn't been like by the director himself. I don't know the name of him, but I know it's by like some visual artists, I believe, that have said like, well, yeah, we've pretty much made Muto Prime and Shinamura not canon because like the Muto's damaged his back in G14. How do you feel about that, given like they're mentioned in your book in King of the Monsters?
Well, I mentioned them because I like things to be canon as well. So I read those graphic novels, and in some cases I read them in script form. They hadn't actually been published as graphic novels yet. But I'm always keen. There's a graphic novel, for instance, going with this new movie called The Hunted. Yeah, which I not only read, they really wanted me to read it because they wanted me to make references to it. I would say that the graphic novels are probably the place where things are most likely not to be canon, even though I think that's changing because Legendary's tightening down on that kind of stuff. Like they're getting much more concerned about it. I mean, as the MonsterVerse goes on and it appears it will keep going on, it becomes more important to the fans that things be consistent.
All right.
Honestly, I've been watching Monarch 2, and I am watching it cold because I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I have asked questions about it because, obviously things in it could affect the novel that I've just written, which, the novelization of GXK. But they're being kind of coy about it, and I think that a lot of it will shake out. And right now, I have some big questions, about that show and what I've been working on, and I don't know the answers to them. But as a fan, I'll find out, I think, and probably if I work on future projects with them, I'll find out more about it too. But I'm enjoying it. Are you liking the show?
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I really like the Ion Dragon a lot. It's probably also I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Frostvark, the big mole, at least in my fan base, the 13,000 of my subscribers, we have pretty much so you know how Titanus Phoetodon was renamed to Doug, and I think it's San.
Right.
One of the heads was named to Kevin. We have collectively renamed the Frostvark to Edward, and have made a whole bunch of memes about it, just saying I love Edward. Yeah, and now they're talking about it in the live stream chat. They're bringing up Edward, but we're trying to get the another monster to have a silly name. So someone did donate for like a quick emergency question, which is, I'm pretty sure there's an answer to this. Why is Godzilla 2014? Why is Spikes sharper? And why is his atomic breath weak? I'm pretty sure it's due to the EMP from the Mutos, correct? From what I've heard.
Yeah. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I wasn't working on the franchise at that point, and I would probably guess it had more to do with storytelling than with having those guys statted out.
All right.
But I don't know for sure because I wasn't involved.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. From what I've heard, it's just because the Mutos have EMPs that they use at the film, and that affects Godzilla and his atomic radiation and all that.
Yep.
All right, so now on to the bazillion Google forms. First one is from Goji Beta. What Toho Kaiju do you wish were to be added to the MonsterVerse? Like, would be one like you'd enjoy to see, like in a MonsterVerse adaptation?
Well, I think Anguirus would be fun.
Anguirus?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I don't know if this counts, but growing up, one of my favorite films was, not strictly speaking a Godzilla film, but the one about the Gargantuas, the War of the Gargantuas.
Oh, Sanda and Guraya.
Yeah. I love those guys.
Love them. They're awesome.
The used to be Frankenstein monster things. Yeah,
they're awesome. All right, Sanda and Guraya and Anguirus. Someone asked how do you end up writing for the MonsterVerse Novelizations, but we answered that very early on. There's one of my friends who's a pretty big YouTuber. He has had a analog horror Godzilla series going on that's been super popular. He's just wondering if you've heard of it. It's called The Man in the Suit. Have you heard of that?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
It's all good. It's this it's like a horror take on the 54 suit. So rather than being Haru Nakajima, it's like this unnamed person, and he gets like super duper obsessed with the suit to the point where one day he stops moving on set. They go to open it, and he's like grown into the suit. It's like super like grotesque and super spooky. Next up from Cool Games YT. Let's see. How come Legendary wants you to write so many of their projects related to Godzilla?
I think because we work well together, they think I sort of get it, so I don't require as much direction. And at this point, I've done enough books for them that I know what they want, and I know what they like and don't like, and I have a good grasp of their MonsterVerse. And they've let me, like, again, Dominion, for instance, was something that was based off a scene that I did in Godzilla King of the Monsters, where I really briefly do a chapter from Godzilla's point of view. And they were they weren't sure that should happen, right? They said, go ahead and do it and we'll look at it.
Yeah.
But doing something from Godzilla's point of view is a bit problematic, because you want him to remain this sort of remote, godlike presence, not somebody that you really inside of his head. But the way I did it, they really liked, and that was what Dominion came from. And they're like, why don't we do the graphic novel kind of like this and make it almost like a nature documentary, right? Except
kaiju
focus. Kaiju instead of like normal, even though there are normal animals in there, right? Like the right whales. And in fact, my favorite panel in that entire graphic novel is the panel when he's swimming with the right whales. There's some really terrific panels in there, but for some reason, that's the one that really jumps out at me personally, because I live on the Georgia coast, and right whales are kind of going extinct, and I just thought it was a really cool image.
Yeah. All right. Well, someone's just asking if you could add another kaiju from the show era. All right. Someone asked...
what we'll say for that, we'll say about that is that, again, whenever we add kaiju, from the Japanese films, there has to be a negotiation about that.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just creating one out of whole cloth. So I know there's a lot of sentiment for that, and I think it would kill myself. But again, that's so far above my pay grade that I can't really, have nothing to do with it.
We have another donation and emergency question from Aiden. Hey, Greg, Have you collected any Godzilla figures? If so, which one is your favorite?
I don't have any Godzilla figures.
None?
I did when I was a kid, like back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I had your standard Godzilla. There was a big plastic one.
Yeah.
But at this point, no. I've got 2 kids, both teenagers, and I keeping them supplied with the stuff that they want is so. I've got other things. I've got a cool shirt with Godzilla in the Great Wave of.
Kanagawa on it.
That shirt, and I've gotten myself other little things like that to wear to conventions and so forth. But in terms of figures, no, I don't have any, I'm afraid.
Speaking of conventions, I just have a quick question that popped in my head. Have you ever been to G-Fest, and like, do you ever plan to like try and get like a panel there?
I've never been to G-Fest. I would go these days. I tend to go to panels, conventions I'm specifically asked to go to, because I have to sort of choose, and I've actually never been asked to go to that one. So, but I would go. I think it would be a good time.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure how G-Fest is. I'm pretty sure, like, I mean, they probably do reach out to some people, but for me, for example, I've been reaching out and talking to them on Messenger, trying to get a little panel set up at some point, just because, like, there's always, I mean, they let YouTubers up there who have, like 100 subs, and I'd like to do some sort of panels just teaching, like, what's, like, important when it comes to making a video, script writing, multiple takes of your script, rough draft, recording, all that. So yeah, I'm trying to currently get something set up with them as well. Someone said, do you have any kaiju / titan that you're fond of, from Alistair the Wendigo?
Repeat that, please.
Do you have any kaiju / titan that you're fond of, like ones that you like?
Well, actually, I kind of like Typhon.
Yeah.
I actually got to write a scene for him for Godzilla King of the Monsters. I got to write out this awakening scene, right? When they and that one got cut, not because nobody liked it or it was a problem. It got cut just because there were too many. At some point, there were like just too many scenes of, there. If you remember correctly, there are these little scenes with the characters that you usually don't ever see again, who are there to witness it happening. They're the point of view. And I had a lot of fun writing that scene, and I was sort of sad that it got cut. And I thought it was a pretty good Titan, and I tried for a while to see if they would just let me put that chapter up, like on social media. And I never really got an answer that was yes. So unfortunately, it's still sitting around somewhere.
All right. Yeah.
And actually, I have a really huge soft spot for Nakika / Kraken.
Yeah.
I really enjoy doing that one.
I consider, like, Nakika's one of the smartest kaiju just because she has 9 brains, correct? Between the 8 tentacles and her main brain. Right.
I mean, sort of based off of cephalopods, which are like that. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you can say, if you can't, just say no comment. But are you able to give any info on Typhon, like how he acts, or like what he resembles?
Yeah. Because I've asked several times about that, I'm going to say no, because
good.
Since it's not in canon at this point, since it's never went to a book, if they choose to put that Titan in a future film, they're still free to do whatever they want. I mean, everybody liked what I did at the time, and it was approved, but that doesn't mean that would be how it would be in the future. Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, no.
All good. Crotty asked, what is your favorite book you've worked on? So I guess Godzilla or any of your other works.
Well, That's a difficult question because obviously I like writing my own stuff where I'm answerable to nobody but me and my editor. And my first several books were original works that I did, and I've just finished another one. So I'm continuing to do that, and I continue to enjoy it. Working in somebody else's playground is really a different experience, and I kind of view it differently from doing my own work, and I do view it as playing in someone else's playground. I always choose franchises that I like. Sometimes I wasn't a fan. Like, I give you an example. I had not played in the Elder Scroll games when I was asked to do a couple of books for them. But so I wasn't sure. I didn't say yes. But then I played through Oblivion a couple of times, and was like, yeah, okay. And so I've never agreed to do a franchise that I didn't have any sort of connection with or that I didn't like. And most of these, like, I sort of talked about how I came into the MonsterVerse. So a favorite book, it's a little like trying to name a favorite child. Even if you can do it, you probably should not do it. I guess of my own stuff, my current favorite is the one that is coming out in April because I'm really excited about it. It's called The Wind That Sweeps the Stars.
All right.
And I think the novelization that I'm working on right now is going to be really good. So far, of the two novelizations I've done, I may have liked Godzilla vs. Kong slightly more because I really like Kong. But of all of the things I've done for Legendary, I would say Dominion, because that was the most just pure fun I've had writing one of those books.
All right. Yeah, Dominion has a whole bunch of stuff going on, and that's why it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and also, as a writer, as somebody that I can't draw my way out of a paper bag, seeing something I've written turned into art like that is really quite amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got an artist of caliber of Drew, right? So,
yeah. Next up from Me0420, what is your favorite Showa kaiju? It's like Showa era.
I know what you're I don't really have an answer for that. I have a problem that is a long-term one, right? When people ask who my favorite anything is. So I usually don't have an answer. I don't have a favorite book. I don't have a favorite movie. I maybe got a top 10 list, but they're not ranked. I guess I just don't think that way for some reason.
Oh, good. Let's see. Ronnie asked that question. From Godzilla, do you like where the MonsterVerse is going? / are you excited for GXK?
I am excited for GXK. I have seen that. I've seen a version of it, and I was really entertained by it. I think it's all good. I think it's going in a positive direction. Obviously, everybody's going to have their own take on it. But I like the way that they're kind of varying the movies up. Just like the Japanese films, some are a little more serious, some are a little goofier.
Yeah.
There's more humor in some. I have a hard time, again, like picking favorites, but for some reason, Kong Skull Island really hit a sweet spot for me. And I can't even qualify why exactly. But for me, that's when the MonsterVerse started really gelling, and I started seeing, okay, and shortly after that, I did Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Kong is briefly in that because we're starting to pull it all together now, right? And Godzilla versus Kong, it really starts pulling together.
correct me if I'm wrong.
I think.
Sorry, keep going.
Oh no, go ahead.
In the novelization, I have the Godzilla King of the Monsters one, and I bought the GVK. I gave it away at G Fest. I did like trivia stuff. If you got it right, I'll give you something. But I'm waiting to buy. I'm gonna buy all of them at once. So the novelization for G14. I already have King of the Monsters GVK. I'm gonna wait for GXK to come out. And I'm gonna just. I don't like reading them. I'm gonna sit down and read them all. But is it in? Because I've heard somewhere. But is it in the novelization where, like, it said, like, Ghidorah's call, like, mess with all the skull crawlers on Skull Island and they go nuts? And Kong just was, like, busy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He hears it. I mean, Kong's always vaguely aware there's other stuff out there. He's just not interested, right? He's got his own problems. At that point, he's got his own problems. He's got the skull crawlers right there. And other, other Titans that he has to deal with all the time. And he certainly has a sense, I think, as long as he stays there, he's not going to run afoul. I mean, he doesn't know who Godzilla or what Godzilla is, but he knows there's something out there that he probably just doesn't need to articulate with, right?
Yeah.
But he does. I mean, everybody here's got Ghidorah's call. It just doesn't have any particular effect on him because, he's more in the class of Godzilla, right? I mean, Ghidorah's call doesn't make Godzilla fall in line.
Yeah.
So he's aware of it, but it's sort of not his business, right? He's kind of an isolationist. He's like dealing with his own backyard.
Yeah.
It's not until he's, forcibly removed from the island that he gets involved in the larger affairs of Hollow Earth and, the Titan universe.
Yeah, I remember how much I've seen people saying how, like, Kong is, like, so cool for just, all these other Titans are like, okay, yes, sir, to King Ghidorah, and Kong's like, meh, I'm good.
Yeah. He hears it, but he's not
Doesn't care.
Swayed at all. Yeah.
Let's see. Next up, okay, I've already answered that. Well, someone just asked them. Okay, I want to make clear to everybody real quick. These are the kind of questions we can't answer. Someone asked who would win, Tiamat or Nakika, just because that would be like giving an answer, and then if a movie comes along, it'd be like contradictory. So we can't ask questions like that. So
well, and even if I answered it, let's say I, for instance, somehow knew the answer to that question. I think there would still be I don't think it would stop the arguments about it, right? They would just assume that I was wrong, or I think a lot of the fun that you guys are having is having these kinds of arguments, right?
Yeah.
So even if I was able to settle them, which I can't because I just don't know, I'm not sure that's I don't know. I mean, I'm asked to settle these arguments a lot, right? And I never do for the reasons I've listed. It's really up to the fans to figure that out, and to a certain extent, especially if it never comes up again, it's for you guys to hash out.
All right. Next up, we have another versus battle, the biggest and largest debate of all time: waffles or pancakes. This was submitted by Godzilla Sonic. Waffles. I'm a pancake guy.
I mean, I like them both, but I like waffles. And in my household, since they're a little bit harder to make and a little more trouble to make, I guess, waffles are definitely the preferred. And since we're in the South, it's often chicken and waffles.
Yeah, I'm up in Virginia, but I've never had any chicken and waffles yet.
I've only ever made them, but my eldest kid, who's 18 now, is a huge chicken and waffle fan. So.
Someone asked if the novels are canon to the MonsterVerse timeline, and you kind of answer that, right? Like, when you write them, they are, but they can kind of get like D.
When I write them are, and I would say substantially at this point, yeah, they are. That's not to say that like they're not some disputed points of canon or things that didn't slipped through, like Scylla's wrong number of legs.
Yeah.
But in general, at this point, yeah. I mean, we're working. That's the goal. right? The goal isn't to intentionally explode canon. It's just sometimes there's so many different people involved in this that sometimes there's going to be a difference of opinion. That's really all I can say about it.
All right. Let's see. It was stated that Ghidorah, this from Polished Duck, interesting name. It was stated that Ghidorah was a quote-unquote younger son. Does that mean there's more Ghidorahs? Is there a Lady Ghidorah? And was Ghidorah juvenile during the events of GVK?
So that's from a legend, right? That's from a legend, I think from New Guinea, if I remember correctly. And some of these legends, you have to take with a grain of salt. So, for instance, in a lot of cultures, and right now I'm thinking of Polynesian, like island seafaring cultures like Polynesia and Melanesia. The reason, for instance, that all the Polynesian islands got settled is because an older son would inherit his father's kingdom. So if a younger son wanted a kingdom of his own, he would have to go off and establish it, right? So this is a story about a supernatural being that these guys were aware of maybe 1,000 years before, but they recast it in terms of their culture. So I wouldn't take that literally. They don't actually know. The people that are telling the story are so far removed from any time when they actually knew Ghidorah. They don't know where he's from, really, or whether he's an elder or younger son or he has no siblings. They've recast it in their cultural terms. Why would he come here? Because he's a younger son. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my background is in anthropology. That's what my degrees are in. So I kind of tend, and specifically the anthropology of mythology and belief, which is another reason I end up doing these kinds of books. So all of those chapter headings where they're quoting, some of them are real stories that were really collected by anthropologists, and some of them, like that one specifically, is one that I sort of made up to feel real. To the point that I even went back and researched what language it would be and all that stuff. But all of that stuff you have to think of as sort of half truths that filter in through mythology, and then some of it may be true, some of it may not be true. And a lot of things too in these books, if you think about it, that are sort of stated about the various titans are people speculating. Mark's speculating, Sarazawa speculating. So maybe they're right and maybe they're not. So there's a lot of that stuff is not definitive, if that makes sense. Just because somebody thinks that sort of goes to the age of Godzilla too, right? There's a huge debate about how old he is exactly. Is he from the Permian, or is that just a species? What was that thing in the Philippines? Anyway, in the graphic novel.
Yeah, I have this current theory about because I know Godzilla's age is getting mixed up a whole bunch, and I know in Legacy Monsters episode 9, Axis Mundi, it shows that there's a third place rather than the surface or Hollow Earth. There's that center area. Because Legendary posted on Instagram how time they're closer to the core, so which makes it confusing because then that means there's the surface in level of deepness. There's a surface, Hollow Earth, and then Axis Mundi. So, So, one of my theories might be is Godzilla is only a couple thousand years old. It's just he's an Axis Mundi here and there, which would make time pass faster.
Yeah, well, that would be a really cool explanation for it. Again, this is not something I know definitively. It's and usually when characters are talking about this in the books, it is speculation. And it may be that they're confusing different members of the same species, like you said. Now that they've introduced this element, which is a a new element for me too, right? I'm also trying to figure this out. The time thing. And I did know early on that there were sort of shallower parts of Alan, like for instance in Godzilla King of the Monsters, he's not necessarily, when he disappears and reappears, or when any of the Titans like disappear and then reappear, they've traveled through Hollow Earth. But obviously his lair, for instance, the one they went to with the magma and Sarazawa blew up, that's not in Hollow Earth. It's down there. It's in some kind of zone, but it's not past that dimensional membrane. So there are various levels of all of this. Of course, in the Skull Crawlers, this is me speculating, but it doesn't seem to me that the Skull Crawlers on Skull Island lived in Hollow Earth either. They were in some kind of intermediary area. Even they probably are from Hollow Earth, just like the rest of the Titans. But well, with the possible exception of Ghidorah, right? But anyway, yeah, it's all getting more interesting. Again, this is all because they do have a group of people dedicated to this at Legendary. I think that you'll find when it all shakes out that there is complete cohesion between the Monarch show, the books, the movies. But I'm fairly close to some of it, but I can't tell you what the final form is going to look. I don't know what the final form is going to look like.
Yeah. Also, in like Godzilla versus Kong, when Kong goes into the Hollow Earth, we see like they're in like this like black void area for a little while, and then they get to, like the tunnel that shoots them out into Hollow Earth. And I'm thinking like maybe like somehow they went through the surface, got shot down to Axis Mundi, and then shot back up to Hollow Earth, which would make it really weird form of travel. But currently
it's a weird form of travel anyway, and I think it's an interesting this whole idea of this sort of almost dimensional membrane, which they're getting at it in Monarch too, right? When he flips the piece of paper over, it's like Hollow Earth is maybe, and this is again just me speculating. I don't know this, but Hollow Earth, it's maybe more than just a bunch of caves underground. Like there's something else going on. And again, one of the things that really attracted me to this group of movies and it was the whole idea of Hollow Earth, because I kind of grew up reading that stuff, the Blue Sidar books by Burroughs and others, and it's scientifically it's not tenable in terms of our modern science. It's pretty clear that the Earth's not hollow, but the idea of it to me as a story element, as a science fiction / fantasy element is for some reason it's really compelling. And also as an anthropologist, I know like almost all the stuff I quote in the books at the beginning of chapters where people are telling stories about their ancestors coming up from beneath the earth, those are all real. I worked a long time with the Choctaw in Mississippi. They definitely believe they emerged from the earth at a place called Nunawaya, and that when they left the underground, they left monsters and ancestors behind them. The Dene, the Navajo, believe something similar, that they came up from beneath the earth and these monsters kind of followed them up.
All right, interesting.
So it's something that people have thought for a long time. It's a really powerful mythic thing, and excuse me.
It's all good.
I think it's really interesting what Legendary's doing with that. So.
Oh, good. One of my friends, Goji Chronic, asked, "Hello, Greg Keys, in your novelization for Godzilla King of the Monsters, before Ghidorah regains the upper hand in Godzilla, Ghidorah bites into an electrical plant, in which is stated Ghidorah gained the power of 100 storms. Does this mean he got 100 times stronger, or is this just an instance of hyperbole?"
That's just a metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's not quantifiable, but it is just to say he got much more powerful.
All
And
right.
he was on the ropes. He was on the ropes, right?
Mhm.
And then he does this and he charges back up. And again, Daryl is working from a script, and I don't think it said. I don't remember whether that's a line of dialogue or it's just my description. It's been a while since I wrote that. But either way, if it was a line of dialogue, it's somebody just kind of spitballing, right? And if it's not, it's me just kind of trying to give you. I don't know if hyperbole is the right word. Maybe that much more powerful. He clearly rallies in a way that suggests he gets a lot more powerful, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
But
he has such violent lightning he even damages his own wings in the film.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a lot of like, will there ever be this in the month? Let's see. Oh, what is your reaction to -1? And do you feel uncertain about where the monster is? Okay, you already answered that. But yeah, how do you feel about -1?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I can't. I don't have an opinion on it. Right. I want to see it. Everybody loves it. As far as I can tell, impact on the MonsterVerse, I don't know. I think from what I know of it, it's a very different film.
Yeah.
From what I've been working on, but that that occurs within the Japanese canon as well, right? Like the first Godzilla movie, pretty bleak.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I love it. It's awesome. But it's about some very hard things, and and then you get much goofier stuff later on. That's also fun, So I think they're very different films. Even though I haven't seen -1, but again, from what I understand of it, it's a completely different thing that shares one mythic character. So I don't have any idea how they're going to be compared. Honestly, I think everybody's going to have their own take on it. Probably best to see them as independent creations because that's what they are. I don't think there was any reference between the two movies in terms of making them. So,
all right. Yeah. Let's see. They also asked, like, what's your favorite Godzilla design? Do you have like a film design that you like a lot?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion about that really.
All right. Someone just said, do you think the DC crossover with the MonsterVerse is canon or non-canon to the timeline? Imagine it's none.
And I don't know. And I've not been involved in that, and I've not read it.
All right.
I've only seen, the stuff that people put up on social media about it. But I just don't have an opinion. It's not that I can't have an opinion about that. I don't because I don't have enough knowledge.
Let's see. Somebody asked, is Godzilla from? It's some ancient Pliocene, Polinci or something. Piloency.
Pliocene?
Yeah, I can't read. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Pliocene would be one of the ages of mammals after the age of dinosaurs. It's the one that I think precedes. I don't remember if it's Miocene. Anyway, it's several tens of millions of years ago. I think it's the one that precedes the Pleistocene, which is the Ice Age. That again is a question about his age, and whereas had I've speculated in my books or if had characters speculate about his age, I don't personally know the answer to that question.
Let's see. There's a whole bunch of repeat questions. Someone asked, do you decide what Titans appear in the novels, or does someone decide for you?
Well, since they're novelizations, for the most part, I'm just following the scripts and the movies, right? When I do get to do something like I did in Godzilla King of the Monsters, where a bunch of Titans are waking up. We know their names. Some of them are on monitors briefly. So I got to pick which ones of those I wanted to show in more detail.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to get approved, but I got to pick the ones. So in that sense, yes, if it's extended material. And Dominion, I had a lot more control of that, even though they wanted me mostly to use established Titans.
Mm.
The one that's Genitor.
Murderfish Janitor?
Yeah, which actually, I didn't really name that Titan that. That was just a term I was using for the artist to know what I was talking about. Like, it's short term. Genitor just means sort of like progenitor, right? It's the person that generates, the animal that generates other animals like itself, like a father or a mother combined, right? It ended up being what they called it, I think, or what people call it, but I don't know that that's an official name. It was just my tag, right? My handle for it.
Mm.
So, but I created that one. I said I want to do one kind of like this. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah. And you could even argue that one's not necessarily of Titan status. It might be. They're kind of playing around with that idea right now, but it was clear early on that there are things that are Titans, and then there are things that are not quite Titans, right? They're not quite big enough, and they're quite powerful enough, but they're also from Hollow Earth, and they're also, for the most part, big.
Yeah, I have a video planned soon on I'm trying to find the picture to send to you so you can see it. What kaiju, what smaller monster in the monsterverse, if it was really big, Titan sized, would be the biggest threat. I'm trying to find the picture to send to you. My argument would be the killer chameleons from Kong Skull Island, the anime. Let me send you the art we got so far on them. I have a artist. All right, I just sent them on Discord. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's part. I mean, in terms of, in a way, it's just a classificatory scheme, because there is a relationship between all these things because they're all probably from Hollow Earth, and are part of the same global ecosystem in a sense.
All right,
but Titan, it occurred to me, and again, this is just me spitballing here. That maybe just looking at Monarch, there's this idea that so they don't have heaves yet. So they get to Hollow Earth by following a Titan down, right?
Yeah.
And there's also suggestion in my books and in the movies that the Iwi, for instance, follow Kong up from Hollow Earth if they were down there to begin with.
Or at least a Kong relative, since Kong wasn't born until Onslaught.
Right, not Kong himself, but one of his forebearers. So it could be that the cut between a Titan and something less than a Titan is whether it can do that.
All right.
Negotiate.
That's good.
I mean, I have no insight on that from Legendary. This is just Greg, thinking out loud. But it seems possible. But anyway, that's
Speaking of Kong, we have another one, which was Godzilla smaller when he fought the ancient Kong from in Dominion? Was it Dominion? Yeah, that was Dominion, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
All Oh,
I mean, the trend is that he gets bigger, so it would not be a bad guess, but I don't know.
you mentioned earlier, like design wise, how like you tell them and then you get to see it come to life. I know there was one channel, I forgot what it was, but the giant lemurs from Dominion, or no, I think it was the
Right.
was it Dominion? Was that, yeah, that was also Dominion. Yeah, yeah, and then it got flooded.
That was Dominion.
Was that referring to like the like prehistoric giant lemurs? Like, were you expecting them to make like actual gigantic lemurs, like mountain-sized ones like those?
No, it was not. Yeah, you're correct.
You fully
That
meant?
what I was thinking of was the actual giant lemurs, which were sort of bear-sized,
Yeah,
right?
not the mountains.
And yeah, yeah. So and did not look like. So that was a result of miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, between me and the artist, because I wasn't in direct communication with Drew during the creation of that. I wrote a script, he saw it, and then everything that happened after that was kind of mediated by Legendary. So I think what happened there was it's me not being clear enough
Mm-hmm.
in what I was talking about. I because of my background is in anthropology and archaeology and paleontology, I tend to sometimes make comments like that and think people know what I'm talking about, and they
Yeah.
don't. So I think Drew just naturally assumed, and some of the people at Titan did too, that what I was talking about were Titan sized. I mean, really, really freaking big
Yeah, I mean,
versions of
in the
King Julian, right? Um,
yeah, yeah,
and that's what we got
in the panel art. They're just like, I mean, casually stepping over entire mountains. Like they're taking up
Right.
like they are massive, probably larger than Godzilla. It looks like they are
Yeah.
just scarily big. One of the largest ones in the MonsterVerse.
Yeah. So
Everybody,
I would
write that down.
say-
Giant King Julian. King Julian is canon. Yep. Mm-hmm. He's yep. Madagascar, part of the MonsterVerse. Let's see. Just a lot of repeat questions over and over.
That said, if those guys appear again, you can guess if they're canon. But I get like my mistake with Scylla's legs. I think this is one that we just have to it's kind of a screw up. But,
I don't know if you can answer this one. Someone just said like, how many Titans could like we expect? Like a lot, a little in the upcoming comics and movies.
I guess I don't know what a lot is. I definitely will say that you're going to see some new stuff. I would, definitely, I would say this movie's Titan heavier than Godzilla versus Kong. And there are more things, still more Titans in my book than there are in the movie. I've seen the script for The Hunted, and I think you'll see some new stuff there too.
Mhm.
So in general, as we get more and more, and of course, Monarch, so as we get more and more into this Hollow Earth world, as we get further from the surface, we're getting more toward, Titan Central. So
All right.
I think you can expect to see more and more of these things. Yeah, definitely. And we already have, right? So, and I think I feel like that's a trend that will probably continue.
So, have you already finished are you still working on the novelization of Godzilla vs. X Kong? Sorry, I have some bad hiccups right now. Are you still working on that? Or is it done?
It's mostly done. I'm still waiting though for final approval from Legendary. So in other words, I wrote it, communicating with them the whole time, but now they have to read it and make sure that there's nothing in there that they don't feel works, nothing in there that doesn't. This obviously would be the added material, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in terms of the final project, in this case, I have seen it, and so and I brought the book in line with that, even though there's still added stuff. Like there's stuff that from earlier drafts of the film and earlier drafts of the script that were cut simply for reasons of time that everybody was happy for me to leave back in. So in the book, there are going to be some scenes that are familiar from the movie that are longer and have more stuff in there. Mm-hmm. But that's been true of the other books as well. So it's pending approval right now. I probably will get more comments in the next week or so. Mm-hmm. But it has to go to press pretty soon. Yeah. So, and they've already done one read through, right? So the guys there are several different groups of people at Titan who read these things. And everybody has read it, a draft of it, back in November and December. And I've responded to their comments. And now we're just waiting to see if my responses were adequate. Does that make sense? Yeah. And if they're not, but we're at the point now when we're just making slight changes. And then it'll go to something called galleys, which is when they go ahead and lay it out and print it like a book. And then there will be one last chance to go through and make relatively small changes. But right. I guess the big answer to your question is it's more or less done.
All right. If you could describe it in one word, what for us to expect, are you able to do that? Just summarize
I think it's fun.
Fun? All right. Awesome.
Yeah. I think this one's fun. I mean, yeah.
All right. So I have just kind of a personal question. Me and my friends were debating this. If the Muto Prime was still alive and didn't get killed by Ghidorah, I mean not Ghidorah, Godzilla. When Ghidorah did his alpha call, would the Mutos have listened to it as easily, or would they be waiting for Prime's permission, or would Muto Prime have listened as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the Muto did show up, right?
Mm-hmm. Queen, yeah.
So
I think the name for it's people gave her a funny fan name. I think it was I think it starts with it's Marth or something.
Yeah.
Hold on. Queen Muto.
So again, I'm not sure. I can't.
Barb.
I would. Barb. Okay, Barb. There you go. Whether the Prime would have been as acceptable, or whether he would be more like Godzilla or Kong, I can't really say. I guess I would lean toward that, but that's just my opinion, And I didn't really have any other than referencing them. I didn't have a lot of experience with those guys.
All right. Are you aware of the what they called the behemoth on the set of King of the Monsters, the big audio system? No?
What do you mean?
So when recording, to get the actors Millie Bobby Brown and all them to get more the vibe of thinking, yeah, there's a big kaiju in front of me, they had this huge audio system that they called Behemoth.
Okay. No, I didn't know that, but that sounds cool.
So they'd play the Titan roars, and this of course at one of the Universal sets. So I can only imagine another set across the down the road, or some other movie being recorded, and they're it's some medieval night thing, and then they just hear a Godzilla roar, and they're oh, all right guys, cut real quick, we gotta redo that. Find that funny. Let's see. I got let's see. People are asking if the Godzilla King of the Monsters original Titans Typhon or Mokele Membe will appear later, or if will they be referenced at any point in the future?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, that's again, that's above my pay grade. It just depends on really what kind of story they want to tell later on, and obviously, yeah, I don't know.
It's all good.
It'd be cool, but I don't know.
How much time do you have left? So I know which questions, just get some important ones, or
I've got like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Let me find some important ones then. Someone asked, have you or anyone on the team ever considered using a kaiju-sized dinosaur like the V-Rex from Peter Jackson's 2005 Skull Island? Has that ever been like a idea at any point in time?
Not that I'm aware of. But whereas most of the Titans reference some kind of living or once living animal, none of them are exactly that, right? I mean, I was a big dinosaur kid, right? And one of the things that attracted me to Godzilla was that he was obviously inspired by dinosaurs,
Yeah.
right? He wasn't a dinosaur, but he's inspired by them. But I think the tendency, and part of this is because it's really fun to. It's fun for me. I'm sure it's fun for the visual effects guys and the script writers to come up with these new monsters, and in general, this is true of all the Godzilla films, right? That there are things that are inspired by living things, but they're never quite that. They're their own things. Even Kong, if you know anything about primate physiology, Kong is not a gorilla. He's not a chimp. I mean, the Kong in the Jackson movie is a gorilla. He's a really big gorilla, right? But the Kong in the Legendary movies, he's his own thing. He's much more like some kind of early human ancestor in a lot of ways, like an Australopithecus robustus or something, than he is like any living ape, because none of them are that bipedal, for one thing. And that's one of the coolest things about, I think, this iteration of Kong, is that they didn't make him just a big version of a living primate. They made him his own species, and that's true kind of across the board of any Titan I can think of in the MonsterVerse. It's draws on things that existed or once existed, with the possible exception of the King Julian Titans.
Yeah, King Julian Titans,
which pretty much just look exactly like modern lemurs, but really big. But again, that was a goof. So probably not. I would say you're probably not likely to see a T-Rex or a Brontosaurus in Hollow Earth.
Yeah. I always talk about how
I haven't. Go ahead.
I always talk about how I completely skipped that phase. Like, every Godzilla fan apparently had, a dinosaur era. I never had that. And so when my friends are like, what's your favorite dinosaur? I'm like, T-Rex? And all the time, like, I'll be like, that's a Spinosaurus. Like, nah, that's a insert random niche dinosaur here. I'm like, oh. So we do have a whole bunch of questions left, but due to time, I'm going to ask you one final question that has, like, a lot of small questions in it.
Okay.
And maybe someday in the future we ever have another one, we can get over the rest. The first part, does Godzilla have a deeper connection with humanity than many think?
Well, he obviously has some connection with humanity. I mean, he was hanging out with some at some point in the past, right? That city was a human city, and they were to some extent worshiping him, fighting with him. I mean, there are pictures of them with him, right? So, I mean, the general idea is that Kong is more connected to humanity, and Godzilla is more connected to bigger things, like the Earth itself, right? But I think it's clear he has some kind of connection with human beings. It's maybe just maybe either simpler or more complicated than we think it is. I think that we're very much for him. I mean, whether we're just like kind of interesting bugs, or not even that, or not even that. I mean, I'm interested in ant beds because I don't want to step in one, right? But that doesn't mean I have a a personal connection with any given ant. So
it's my favorite ant. I named him Bart.
It's just, I think that's to be seen, but there's clearly some kind of connection. You have that, and then if we consider it canon, in the earlier graphic novel, he had some kind of relationship with those island natives, right?
All right.
So whether this connection is mostly humans connecting with him or him connecting with humans, my suspicion is it's mostly humans connecting with him as a god or a monster, and he not minding.
Yeah.
Like he can deal with it.
So you guys do you.
Yeah.
The other smaller questions that are in this one. Does Godzilla care for Mothra? It's like a yes or no from that.
I would say that there's a deep connection between him and Mothra. When you start talking about words like care and attributing human emotions to Godzilla, I think that's problematic. I mean, I've been told it's problematic for one thing. He's not human, and the things he feels are not what human beings feel.
Yeah.
But there is I would say, a connection between the two of them that's really strong and really ancient.
And the final two in this, does Godzilla remember his mom or dad?
Does Godzilla remember his mom or dad?
Yeah.
I have no idea. In fact, I don't even know if he had a mom or dad. That's not clear to me. I early on in writing some of these books, we would talk about Godzilla's species, and at a certain point, Toho asked us to stop doing that. I don't know why. I don't know what that indicates. I don't know what that means to them. But while it's clear that there have been other titans very similar to, like the ones that Serizawa finds mummified or whatever underground.
Yeah, that was the final part.
What exactly the relationship between all these things are is a little bit unclear, but thinking of Godzilla as a species is apparently not the way we're meant to think about Godzilla.
Yeah, the final question had to do with that. Does Godzilla, did he know about Dagon? Did he, know him in a sense? Kind of like a, yo, what's up, man? Friendly in a way?
I have no idea.
Alrighty.
I don't know.
Well, that is about it. The rest are mostly repeats. There are some other questions left, but we are out of time. So, thank you. Is there any, final thing you'd like to say to everybody?
No, not really. I mean, I do try to answer questions on Instagram in particular. People find me there. It's just Greg Keys 1. I get a lot of questions, and I can't these questions. I can't answer them all, and because there are so many, it can take me a while to get around to it. But you're free to ask me there.
Alrighty.
And yeah, no, I've enjoyed this. It's been fun. Thanks.
No problem. Let me just put up the image so everybody can go give you a follow right there, everybody. Alrighty. Well, thank you, Mr. Keys. It was absolutely awesome to talk to someone who has written a part of what has been my pretty much childhood. So that is absolutely awesome. And yeah, I think that's gonna be it for today's stream.
Okay.
As always, everybody, keep collecting. Godzilla Guy and Mr. Keys out.